You guys are going to have to forgive me. I'm making my coffee and I got to go to work, but I got to get this recording out. So this is you guys meeting me in the middle, dealing with the sounds of me making coffee in the background. Over the past few days, we have seen an influx of Hill and Knowlton type CIA propaganda that has been par for the course anytime the cabal is looking to re-aggravate the interventionists' capabilities of the United States. And at first I didn't understand why we were watching what I've been calling the controlled detonation of Afghanistan, or the slow fall of the towers. And it's kind of become obvious to me, why did the towers fall to begin with? To get us into Afghanistan. So why are we watching a slow controlled detonation of Afghanistan? It's to keep us in Afghanistan. They are going to bungle this so bad and cause so many reactions in country that there is going to inevitably be the neocon call for us to remain in Afghanistan and for us to keep larger forces there. This is probably the plan that they enacted when they realized that there was zero support for the war. We'll just pull out, we'll bungle it so bad that everybody will call for us to stay there. They emptied out Bagram Air Base before they withdrew American civilians from the country. They're now dealing with one civilian airport, one runway, instead of holding on to Bagram Air Base that has multiple runways and conducting exfiltration out of both airports until all civilians are gone and then the military leaves. You guys, this is very common sense. Anybody who saw We Were Soldiers understands the basic point. First boot on the ground, last boot off the ground. And we never leave anyone behind. These things used to be so common sense that even people who never served understood that that was the ethos. And yet what did we do? The military left. Literally. And so the CIA meets with the Taliban on the 24th. They come out and they say, listen, we got this new terror threat from ISIS Special K, and it's not the Taliban now. It's ISIS Special K. Kind of like when we were pulling out of Iraq and they were like, we've got this new threat coming from ISIS. Now, it's not Al-Qaeda. It's ISIS. It's a different threat. And then, oh, we got 100% certainty there's going to be a bombing. And then, you know, the pictures of the babies over the barbed wire fences and all the other stuff comes out. And then, what would you have guessed? A suicide bombing attack. Who would have ever thought? Oh, wait, the CIA thought. They warned everybody on the 24th. Oh. And so when I woke up today and I saw this, I know what's coming. We're going to have more shenanigans in Afghanistan. So let's just play this and I'll try not to interrupt as much as I can.
Another terrorist attack in Kabul is, quote, likely. Pentagon officials also saying there are, quote, specific and credible threats of even more attacks around the Kabul airport. These warnings come a day after a suicide bombing killed 13 U.S. service members and scores of Afghans. Amid that stern alert today, the airlift of remaining Americans and Afghans trying to flee the country presses on. President Biden maintains that the U.S. will hunt down those responsible for the bombing as he sticks to his self-imposed withdrawal deadline 4 days away. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin joins us live from the Pentagon tonight. Good evening, Jen.
Good evening, Brett. The president's national security team told him today that U.S. forces in Kabul face imminent terror threats, and it's likely to get worse in the coming days as the military tries to meet a Tuesday deadline.
These threats very, very specifically, virtually in real time.
New details about the attack at the Kabul airport forced a Pentagon correction. There was one suicide bomber, not two, yesterday, and no explosion at the Barron Hotel. A single suicide bomber approached Marines at Abbey Gate. Then gunmen...
Okay, so this is why I don't make videos about this stuff the day it happens. I understand that a lot of content creators want to get ahead of the story, and I understand that a lot of people want to hear from their content creators when something like this happens. But if I had reported on this yesterday, I would have reported on the bombing that they said went off at the hotel and the bombing that went off at the gate. And it turns out most of that information is incorrect. It was more than a dozen soldiers killed. It was over 100 Afghan nationals killed. It was not two suicide bombers. There was no explosion at the hotel, and it was all done at the gate. Now, imagine all the horrible reporting you heard yesterday that was contrary to what I just said. And then Fox News, of course, is one of the main proffers of this bad information. And then today they just clean it all up. And this is what really happened. What they're not letting you know is that a single suicide bomber that killed that many people, there have been some severe security breakdowns. That means one of two things. You're dealing with a giant explosive, or you're dealing with a massive crowd of people that were packed close together and not properly searched before they were put into that situation.
Suicide bomber approached Marines at Abbey Gate. Then gunmen opened fire. The Pentagon unwilling.
When gunmen opened fire. So you had a suicide bomber combined with small arms fire.
To blame the Taliban.
I understand that you're reliant on them for protection around the airport, but are you ruling out them being involved because you're so dependent on the Taliban right now?
Actually, I didn't hear General McKenzie put it that way, Jen. In fact, I think in one of the questions he got, and I think it was Idris's, he said, Idris asked, was there a failure? And the general said, of course, there was a failure somewhere, obviously.
And in terms of ISIS-K, how many ISIS-K prisoners were left at Bagram and are believed to have been released from the prison there? And why weren't they removed before the U.S. pulled out to someplace like Gitmo?
Well, I don't know the exact number. Clearly, it's in the thousands.
Thousands. You guys, they left Bagram to the Afghan nationals with no checks and balances whatsoever. Just on what the Afghan nationals were saying, we got this, thanks guys. What the hell is going on with our military brass?
U.S. officials say reports that they shared lists of Americans and Afghan allies with the Taliban are incorrect, adding that in some cases, to get these Afghans through a checkpoint, they provide the information, and for the most part, the Taliban have been letting those people pass.
My God. Did you just hear that? Holy cow. I mean, let's be real. This lady just said the Pentagon has denied giving the Taliban lists to get people through checkpoints, adding that the Pentagon has given lists to the Taliban to get people through checkpoints. What?
The notion that we are just providing them with names upon names of individuals who may stay behind in Afghanistan or in a way that would expose anyone to additional risk, that is simply false.
So that is such an interesting statement from a politician. The notion that we are just has to be in that sentence. Handing over information, and then there's another qualifier, just in mass, is incorrect. Now, we are handing that specific information over in specific cases.
The notion that we are just providing them with names upon names.
Names upon names. They're not just providing them with names upon names. They are providing them with names. They're not just providing them with names upon names, but they are providing them with names. This kind of double talk is so disgusting.
Of individuals who may stay behind in Afghanistan or in a way that would expose anyone to additional risk, that is simply false.
And did he mention the hide systems, the biometric identity systems that they left behind that were captured by the Taliban? Did he mention that? No, he didn't, did he?
And unbelievably, unfathomable to me and so many others, is that the Taliban now has biometric devices, which have the fingerprints, eye scans, and the biographical information of the Afghans who helped us over the last 20 years.
The Pentagon also denied reports the Taliban had already entered Kabul airport.
Have the Taliban entered or taken control of any parts of the military section of Al-Qaeda that you're aware of?
The Taliban are not in control of any part of Hamid Karzai International Airport. I saw that report too. It's false.
As to why the U.S. didn't send those ISIS-K to Gitmo, the answer from the Pentagon, they thought the Afghan National Army would watch them. Troops remain on edge tonight in Kabul. Even after that suicide bombing yesterday, 12,500 people were evacuated on 35 military transport planes. Unfortunately, some of those C-17s were medevacs. The 13 American heroes who were killed by that suicide bomber, Brett, will return home to Dover tomorrow.
And you guys, I really don't. It's impossible to just blame Biden for this, because during this bungled Afghanistan withdrawal, we are seeing how it truly is a cabal of people. And we just recently talked about General Milley and his little rant that he did on critical race theory and how he wants to know about white guilt or whatever it is that white rage. This is Marine Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller This is the only officer relieved of his duties because of the absolute nonsense that has been the withdrawal from Kabul. This officer was relieved of his duties not because he participated in any way, but because he criticized. We're going to talk about that, but first let's listen to what he had to say.
But the reason people are so upset on social media right now is not because the Marine on the battlefield let someone down. That service member has always rose to the occasion and done extraordinary things. People are upset because their senior leaders let them down, and none of them are raising their hands and accepting accountability or saying, we messed this up. If an 05 battalion commander has the simplest live fire incident EO complaint, boom, fired. But we have a Secretary of Defense that testified to Congress in May that the Afghan National Security Force could withstand the Taliban advance. We have chairmen of Joint Chief, who the Commandant is a member of that, who's supposed to advise on military policy. We have a Marine combatant commander. All of these people are supposed to advise, and I'm not saying we've got to be in Afghanistan forever, but I am saying, did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, the strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up? I've got battalion commander friends right now that are posting similar things, and they're saying, wondering if all the lives were lost and if it was in vain, all those people that we've lost over the last 20 years. And he goes on to say that we're all part of a chain. While every link may not be tested, the strength of the chain is only as strong as each link, and you got to be, good link, something like that. And what I'll say is, and from my position, potentially all those people did die in vain if we don't have senior leaders that own up and raise their hand and say, we did not do this well in the end. Without that, we just keep repeating the same mistakes. This amalgamation of the economic / corporate / political / higher military ranks are not holding up their end of the bargain. I want to say this very strongly. I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
Now that you've heard what he had to say, I think this guy summed up how I feel about this pretty well. He was absolutely right. If it was when we were in the military, then he would have had to have been relieved of command. But very importantly, the standard has changed. The leadership changed it. The rule is now uniformed military can do politics, so I would give him a medal. Now, I wouldn't go so far as give him a medal, but I would argue that the standard has changed. And if they were allowed to speak about politics on January 6th, which, remember now, they did. Let's look. Remember, in a rare joint message, top U.S. military leaders condemn the Capitol riot. There's General Milley. Now, the funny thing about General Milley, he gets to go out and say all these politically charged things, and there were other generals in the Pentagon and other officers that all made speeches at the same time. It was like they all did a coordinated release of information right after the Jan 6 event. It was obviously targeted. But anyways, I'm not even going to go down that route again. The point is that there were uniformed officers on Instagram live streaming talking about how horrible the January 6 riots were because it was MAGA gone crazy. I had never seen this before, ever. But that's what they did. And so I don't understand how what this officer is doing is any different. But the difference is, of course, this officer was talking about the conservative perspective and not espousing Soviet propaganda like General Milley does, who should absolutely step down. Let's remember what he said about Bagram Air Base, because remember, they're doing an evacuation out of a single civilian airport with one runway, and the reason why we're in that position is because our brilliant military leaders gave up the best airport we had to do evacuations in Bagram Air Base, when they could have kept both.
Is it at all possible to keep Bagram Air Force Base?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? So a couple of quick comments here. On Bagram, is not necessary tactically or operationally for what we're going to try to do here with Afghanistan. Consolidate on Kabul in support of their government.
They abandoned Bagram Air Force Base in one of the stupidest military blunders in all of U.S. history, and now we're left in a situation where we're relying on a civilian airport, Karzai, that has only one runway. I don't think the American people fully appreciate the danger and the peril into which the president has put us, because one RPG taking down a plane onto that runway means we're stranded. So the president needs to make sure that this hostage situation into which we're drifting, that the Taliban knows we will not stand for it.
Now, it seems to me like this guy should be fired for saying that a lot more than this guy should be for saying this. One way or another, it's been one heck of a circus watching what's been going down in Afghanistan, and I can't help but to feel everything is targeted to cause division and keep us in Afghanistan. We're seeing a situation play out here where everybody's going to have plausible deniability. The Democrats and the Republicans were both supporting the withdrawal. The generals were all on board. We were all going to do it perfectly, and then everything just fell apart. And then there was the bombing, and now they're warning of another bombing, and we're just going to have to stay there with some kind of force over time. There's going to be a circus, and it's going to look like Biden wants to really stick to the deadline on August 31st. And all of these outside forces, the neocons, some Republicans, some Democrats, the usual suspects, will be clamoring for war and for us to stay there, and we need to put more troops in there, and this needs to take longer, and Biden's going, no, don't, no, I must stick to my guns, August 31st. The entire thing is an orchestra being conducted from beginning to end. Should we make Biden stick to his guns no matter what? August 31st, we're out. It seems to me that games are being played, and it's the same kind of games that they play when they want the U.S. into war. In my mind, I want it over, because I'm now realizing there are actors in Afghanistan who are now working to do everything they can to keep and justify a United States military presence in Afghanistan, and they're going to use the same old tactics that they've always used to justify American military presence in any country. And the way they do that is with the loss of American blood and treasure. That's what they do. Talk to you guys later.